Welcome to the Gray Area right here on 105.3 The Fan. Kevin Gray. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. And you can subscribe to my YouTube channel also at Kevin Gray Sports. And don't forget to subscribe to the 105.3 The Fan YouTube channel, home of your Dallas Cowboys and Texas Rangers. The new home of Dan Quinn is the Dallas Cowboys after agreeing to a 3-year deal to become the Dallas Cowboys' new defensive coordinator. He also brought along with him Joe Whitt Jr., formerly of the Atlanta Falcons, where, yes, they did statistically have the worst passing defense in all of the NFL this past season. And in his previous stop with the Cleveland Browns, they were 17th in passing touchdowns and 17th in net yards per attempt. With the Falcons, they were also 29th in net yards per attempt. But nonetheless, Joe Whitt is a disciple of Mike McCarthy, who he worked for 10 years in Green Bay, and now is brought back alongside Mike McCarthy and Dan Quinn to try to remake this defense. But regardless of the defense that Dan Quinn runs and Joe Whitt tries to coach with the secondary, this Dallas Cowboys defense is going to be needing an overhaul in terms of its talent. A team that finished 23rd in the NFL in yards per game allowed. They also allowed the second most points per game in 2020 and the most points in franchise history at 473. Not to mention, they allowed the second most rushing yards in franchise history at over 2,500 yards. So when you start thinking about how porous this defense was a year ago, this team is going to need an overhaul in terms of not just the scheme itself, which was a failed one that Mike Nolan tried to run and trying to install that in the middle of a pandemic, but it's going to need a scheme that fits the talents and skill sets of the players that are currently here, whomever does remain with the Dallas Cowboys. Even though Jalen Smith a season ago had over 160 tackles, which led the team once again, you could tell that he was lost in space and confused a lot of the time and not being able to get off of blocks and getting pushed around. And, of course, we know about the lateral movement that is virtually non-existent for Jalen Smith. Not to mention Leighton Vander Esch dealing with collarbone and high ankle sprains, the injury concerns reoccurring for him again after he had come back from a neck injury to play this year before subsequently getting hurt 2 more times. And then you start thinking about this secondary. The Cowboys overall have 22 free agents, and a lot of these free agents are within the secondary. I'm talking about guys like Xavier Woods, Chido Awuzie, and Jordan Lewis, who was tied with Jalen Smith for the most penalties on the team this year at 8. So all up and down every single level of this defensive front, linebacking core, and in the secondary, there needs to be significant changes. Even on the defensive front four, Neville Gallimore, yes, showed flashes and continued to get better as the season went on. But when you had injuries to guys like Gerald McCoy, Tristan Hill, and you got really inconsistent play from Tyron Crawford and others, this was a defensive line that, other than Randy Gregory when he had the chance to be on the football field, and DeMarcus Lawrence, who, yes, only had 6.5 sacks, but was a disruptor all season long, there isn't much to have a lot of confidence with if you're Dan Quinn trying to improve this defensive line also. And that's if even Aldon Smith decides to stay after, of course, he is a loyalist to Mike Nolan and Jim Tomsula, who he played for when he was in San Francisco. We already touched on the linebacking core, questions about Sean Lee and Joe Thomas and whether or not they will be back this upcoming season, especially if Sean Lee decides to opt into retirement. Would he join this defensive staff as potentially a coach there at the linebacking position? And then the secondary is where things get really dicey. Obviously, Trevon Diggs is a promising young corner, had 3 interceptions on the season, and shows like the second-round pick that he was out of Alabama that has a lot of promise going forward. But other than that, guys like Anthony Brown, who, yes, are in the fold with a 3-year, $15 million deal, will still be around. But as we mentioned, Chido Awuzie, Jordan Lewis, Xavier Woods, who wasn't all that great this past season for the Cowboys, all may be gone by the time we get to the start of the 2021 NFL season. And Donovan Wilson is really the only one that you can say with confidence that he will be in the starting lineup going into next year. Dan Quinn, while he is a very good defensive coordinator, was able to bank on the fact that he had a general manager in John Schneider with the Seattle Seahawks who were able to make the most in value in terms of some of the picks that they had in terms of later rounds. I'm talking about guys like Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor, whom were later round picks that turned out to be fantastic football players. The onus now is going to be on Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, and Will McClay to be able to find the kinds of defensive talent that Dan Quinn can help mold to help this defense get better into 2021. Because, again, regardless of the scheme that they run with the personnel that is here, this team is going to need to upgrade its talent in significant ways, whether that be trying to do it in free agency, which we know historically the Cowboys don't necessarily do in terms of paying their safeties and their corners. Hello, Byron Jones. But if the Cowboys want to make modern investments in the secondary, much like how the rest of the NFL does in terms of the safety position with teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Kansas City Chiefs, the New England Patriots, you can name any number of teams like the Seattle Seahawks, for example, who decided to go out and get Jamal Adams, who I know is a quote-unquote box safety, but he also had nearly 10 sacks on the season and helped that defense for Seattle turn it around in the second half of the year. Those are the kinds of modern investments that this Cowboys team is going to have to make in order to find themselves being better defensively. And I'm not saying this team needs to be a championship-level defense. All they have to do is really be competent. Even the Kansas City Chiefs in their Super Bowl win a couple of seasons ago weren't necessarily a top-5 defense. They were good enough in the top half of the NFL to make sure that they were holding teams just enough so that that offense, like Patrick Mahomes and others, could do their thing offensively. That's what the Cowboys need to be. If they are within the top 10 to 15 in terms of defense going into next year, the expectation is that this offense is going to score a ton of points going into next year. So guys like Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and then, of course, the returning offensive line with guys like Tyron Smith and others are going to give this offense a lot of chance to score points. And, yes, Ezekiel Elliott also. And as long as this defense finds themselves playing competent football and being able to create turnovers, which they started to do at the end of this year, then they have a chance to create turnovers to give this offense the opportunity to score a bunch of points. And if that is the case, then this team could find themselves winning possibly 10 to 11 games. I know that's a little optimistic given what we saw this past season. But again, for Dan Quinn, this is not just about a schematic change. This isn't just about a personnel change. This is about a cultural overhaul on a defense that needs to learn how to play for one another consistently week over week. And then as they do, they will find themselves being much more consistent on the defensive side of the football. Better technique, better sound football, and an upgrade in personnel is what this Cowboys team needs to be able to do so. So I would not be shocked if the Cowboys, especially in this particular draft, went defensive heavy. They have the number 10 overall pick and they have multiple picks coming with respect to the compensatory picks when they lost guys like Robert Quinn and Byron Jones and others. That should give them even more picks to have opportunities to throw at the dartboard in order to try to find the defensive talent, much like how Seattle did back in the day when they were able to find guys like Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman and others. But the foundation of a Dan Quinn, Seattle Seahawk-like defense when they were building their championship team started from the back to the front. And in today's modern NFL, you're going to have to do a lot of the same. Can you have safeties in the back end that can make plays on the football? Can you have corners who can operate on an island? Can you have a linebacking core that can shed blocks, move side to side, but also move downhill to make plays in the running game? And then can you have a front four for the Dallas Cowboys that is getting up the field and creating pressure on offensive linemen, standing offensive linemen up to create the kind of pressure around the quarterback to be able to sack the quarterback? All those things are going to have to be fixed by Dan Quinn and this defense. And if they are able to do so, the Cowboys, and I know it sounds like a whole lot to fix, if they can, this Cowboys defense has a chance to be much better in 2021. But Dan Quinn, Joe Whitt, and this secondary and this overall defensive coaching unit has a lot of work to do. There are some parts that they can work with, i.e. DeMarcus Lawrence, Donovan Wilson, Trevon Diggs, and a couple of others whom you may feel like or not will be a part of this team going into next year. But if short of that, this Cowboys team's got a long way to go defensively. But Dan Quinn seems like he's the right man for the job, and with an improvement in talent going into next year, this team can be much better. Only time will tell if Jerry, Stephen Jones, and Will McClay will ensure that the talent that's around him, and I know guys like Kevin was like, what's Bradley and I? Those guys. Yeah, Reggie Robinson, I know. We'll see if they get a chance to get on the field. But it's going to be up to the brass and the personnel department to find the kind of talent to give Dan Quinn the best opportunity to succeed. We'll see if they're able to do that. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to subscribe to the 105.3 The Fan YouTube channel right here at 105.3 The Fan. We'll talk to you later. Peace.